Have you ever walked into a family dinner, thinking it would be just another ordinary night, and instead found yourself in the middle of a secret so dark, so twisted, that it could have ruined everything? Imagine sitting across from your parents, your sister, a family friend, everyone smiling, laughing, acting normal, and then your daughter, your own child, slips a folded note into your lap that simply says, "Call 911. No explanation, no details, just those two words. What would you do? Would you freeze? Would you play along? Or would you risk everything to protect her? This is the story of the night my world turned upside down, and how a quiet dinner at a countryside house revealed the truth I never wanted to face. At a family dinner, my mother, Elaine, was smiling warmly, like everything was perfectly fine. My father, Robert, raised his glass and started making a toast. My younger sister, Maya, was half listening, half scrolling through her phone under the table. And then, just as I was taking a sip of wine, my daughter, Sophie, leaned close and slid a note into my hand. I didn't think much of it at first. I thought maybe she had written something silly, maybe an inside joke. But when I unfolded the scrap of paper beneath the tablecloth, my whole body went cold. In messy capital letters, two words were written: "Call 911. My eyes darted toward Sophie. Her face was pale, her hands trembling, though she kept her gaze fixed on the middle of the table as if nothing had happened. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to react, not to show panic. I didn't call attention to it. I didn't say a word. Instead, I quietly tucked the note under my thigh and forced a nervous smile at my parents. "Just a little heavy on the potato salad," I muttered when Mom asked if I was all right. Everyone laughed. Everyone carried on. But I couldn't feel my hands anymore. That night was supposed to be simple, quiet. I had driven 2 hours from Raleigh to my parents' countryside retreat. And when I say retreat, that's a generous word. It was really just a low-ceiling, musty house with thin walls, creaky floors, and the kind of mildew smell that never really leaves. You know the kind, more stress than peace, more tension than comfort. But still, it was family. And I thought I was doing the right thing. Sophie had been staying there for a couple weeks after graduating high school. My parents had insisted she needed a break, some fresh air. They told me she looked pale, that she needed rest, and that they missed her. And, gullible as I was, I believed them. Truthfully, Sophie hadn't been the same since Uncle David, my mother's older brother, passed away 3 weeks earlier. David had no wife, no kids of his own. He'd been like a grandfather to Sophie, maybe even more than that. His little house was filled with hand-carved wooden trains, shelves of old books, and that warm, safe smell of cinnamon and coffee. He was gentle, soft-spoken, and he adored Sophie in a way that made her feel seen and loved. When he died in his sleep, Sophie was devastated. She shut down. She stopped answering calls, barely ate, barely slept. She was drowning in grief. And so, when my parents offered to take her in for a while, I thought maybe it would help. Maybe being surrounded by family, by fresh air and quiet countryside, would give her some comfort. I was wrong. That night, when I arrived, I didn't see it at first. I walked into the house, carrying a bottle of wine, trying to be cheerful. My mom hugged me, my dad cracked a joke about my wine actually being drinkable this time, and Maya waved from the kitchen. They'd even lit candles on the porch like they were hosting some cozy Airbnb. And there was Sophie, smiling, kind of. She looked thinner, her eyes glazed like she'd been crying. When she hugged me, it was just a little too long. The kind of hug that whispers, "Thank God you're here," without saying the words out loud. But I ignored my gut. I told myself she was just tired. I squeezed her hand, asked if she was okay, and when she nodded, I let it go. Dinner started: burgers, potato salad, tomatoes that looked like they'd been carved with a spoon. My dad told a story about nearly crashing a golf cart. My mom kept refilling glasses with boxed wine, calling it just a splash while pouring half a cup. Maya didn't look up from her phone. And then there was the man across from me, smiling, watching me. I didn't remember his name. I didn't remember ever being introduced. But he sat there like he belonged. It was then, just as my father lifted his glass to toast family and fresh air, that Sophie's hand brushed my knee under the table and slipped me the note. "Call 911. 2 words that ripped the ground from under me. I excused myself, saying I needed the bathroom. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my chest. I grabbed my bag on the way just in case. I didn't even know what just in case meant yet, but I knew I needed it. The bathroom door stuck halfway like it always did. I locked it behind me, sat on the closed toilet lid, and tried to breathe. My hands were shaking so badly that it took 3 tries to unlock my phone. I didn't text a friend. I didn't call my husband. I dialed 911. The dispatcher answered almost immediately. Emergency services. What's your location? I gave the address, my voice cracking halfway through. I don't know what's happening, I whispered. My daughter just gave me a note. Said to call 911. She looks terrified. She's been staying here with my parents. I think she's in danger. The dispatcher asked for details, how many people were in the house, whether anyone was hurt. I answered what I could, but most of it was, I don't know. All I knew was my daughter looked like she'd been crying for days, and she was scared enough to risk slipping me that note. The dispatcher promised someone was already on the way. When I hung up, I sat frozen on that toilet lid, staring at the faded wallpaper. I had just called the police on my own family. And now I had to walk back out there. I don't even remember unlocking the bathroom door. I don't remember walking back to the table. Somehow I just did it. When I sat back down, the glass of wine was still in front of me. I picked it up, held it in my hand like a prop, but I didn't drink it. If I put it down, I was sure my hands would start trembling, and everyone would see. I looked at Sophie. She hadn't moved. She hadn't blinked. She stared straight ahead, her leg bouncing under the table, her knuckles white where they rested on her lap. And I thought, this isn't paranoia. She's scared, really truly scared. So I forced myself to act normal. I smiled when my dad cracked another joke. I laughed when my mom said something about how good the tomatoes were this year. And I nodded when the man across the table gave me that unsettling little grin. But inside I was screaming. 15 minutes, the dispatcher had said. Help would be there in 15 minutes. Felt like 15 years. While I waited, my brain did what it always does when I'm in crisis. It wandered backwards. Because this moment, this house, this family, it wasn't new. Not really. I grew up in that countryside house. My parents bought it when I was 4. Back then I thought it was magical, wide lawns, a porch swing, woods that felt endless. But the magic faded fast. My parents weren't the kind who yelled. They weren't dramatic or explosive. They were colder than that. Polite, distant, formal, almost like parents out of a staged family photo. If you asked them, they'd tell you they did everything right. We had food, clothes, school plays, and Christmas presents. My mom even packed lunches with little notes that said, "Be kind. Love, Mom." But what no one saw was the silence. Affection wasn't free in our house. My younger sister, Maya, could spill juice, throw tantrums, cry over cartoons, and they'd laugh and comfort her. But me? I had to earn it. Straight A's, good behavior, chores, anything for a glance of approval. I remember once at 7 years old, I choreographed a whole dance routine in the living room just to make them smile. They looked at me politely, then told me to stop because I was being loud. That was my childhood. The absence of love disguised as perfection. By the time I was a teenager, I gave up trying. I told myself, maybe you can't make people love you. Maybe this is just who they are. When Sophie was born, I swore she would never feel that way. She would never question if she was loved. I made sure she knew every single day. And for a while, my parents acted like they cared. They bought stuffed animals when she was a baby, sent birthday cards, offered to babysit. But soon the pattern repeated. They grew distant, disinterested, polite but detached. I never stopped them from seeing Sophie. I thought, if they want a relationship with their granddaughter, fine. Let it happen. But Sophie noticed. Kids always do. The only person who never let her down was Uncle David, my mother's brother. David was different. He'd never married, never had kids. He lived quietly, worked hard, retired early. But when Sophie came along, something inside him lit up. He adored her. He never missed a birthday, never forgot a school play. He brought her picture books in Italian, carved her wooden toys, sent her little gifts for no reason at all. He called her his miracle girl, and she loved him with her whole heart. When he passed away a few weeks ago, Sophie broke. I thought grief came in waves, but for her it was like a blackout. No light, no sound, no movement. Just pain. And then my parents called. Let her stay with us for a couple weeks, they said. She needs fresh air. She needs family. I believed them. That's how Sophie ended up in this house, sitting next to me at this dinner table, pale and trembling, slipping me a note that said, "Call 911. The knock at the door came exactly 17 minutes later. Everyone froze. My father stopped mid-sentence. My mother paused with her glass halfway to her lips. Maya looked up from her phone, confused. Sophie didn't move at all. I stood. "I'll get it," I said, trying to sound casual. The man across the table, the so-called family friend, shifted in his chair, like he wasn't sure whether to follow me. I walked to the door and opened it. 2 officers stood there, one male, one female. Their faces were serious. Their radios buzzed faintly. "Ma'am," the male officer said, "we received a call from this residence." "I called," I said quickly. My voice was too high, shaky. "It's my daughter. She gave me a note. She asked me to call 911. She's here. Something's wrong. She won't say it out loud, but something is very wrong." The officers didn't doubt me. They didn't question me. The female officer nodded once. "We'd like to speak with her alone." I pointed toward the dining room. "She's at the table." The male officer stepped aside and asked me to come out to the porch with him. My legs felt like lead, but I followed. They were inside for 7 minutes. I know because I checked my phone over and over again, counting the seconds. I stood on that porch, staring at the dead roses in my mother's garden, my stomach twisted into knots. When the door finally opened again, Sophie came out with the female officer. She was pale, her hands shaking, but she was talking. For the first time in weeks, she was talking. The male officer waved me closer. I got as far as the doorway before I heard her words. "Uncle David left everything to me," Sophie said. Her voice was trembling but clear. "They said I was grieving, that I needed rest. But then they started trying to get me to sign papers. I didn't understand them. They said it was to simplify things. But it had my name on it." The officer asked gently, "What kind of papers?" "I don't know. Something about releasing responsibility. Something about the estate. That man," she pointed to the lawyer inside. "He said he was Uncle David's attorney, but he never called me. He only talked to them. He came here. He told me to sign. But when I said no, they took my phone. They told me it was for my mental health. They said I'd thank them later." She paused, swallowed hard, then whispered, "I think they were drugging me." The world tilted. Even the walls of the house felt like they took a step back. The officers moved quickly after that. They gathered everyone in the living room, my parents, Maya, the lawyer. My mom stood up immediately. "This is ridiculous." My dad raised his hands like a preacher. "She's been grieving. You have to understand, we were only trying to help." Maya muttered, "She's paranoid. She hasn't been well since the funeral." The lawyer stayed silent. The female officer said firmly, "We'll need to search the property." My mom laughed, brittle and sharp. "Based on what?" "Her imagination." The officer didn't flinch. "We have a report and a statement. That's probable cause." Backup was called. And I stood there in the doorway watching it all unfold, like I was outside of my own body. Like I was watching a documentary about someone else's family tearing itself apart. The search began in the kitchen. It took 15 minutes for them to return with a plastic bag. Inside were small round pills. Off-white. No prescription bottle, no label. Just shoved into a drawer under a pile of coupons. Field testing was ordered. Then they searched the guest bedroom, the one the lawyer had been staying in. That's where they found the documents. Neat, stapled, typed. My daughter's name printed clearly across the top of each page. Beneficiary, release of claim, estate forfeiture. All prepared, all waiting for her signature. And then they searched the basement. I'd never been down there. My parents always said it was just for storage. But it wasn't storage. It was a finished room. A bed. A side table. Blankets folded neatly. It looked almost cozy. If you didn't notice the bolt on the outside of the door, or the tiny window that didn't open, Sophie's jacket was there. Pair of her socks. Her notebook half filled. And on the table, her necklace, the one Uncle David gave her for her 16th birthday, placed carefully like it was waiting for her. But one thing was missing. Her phone. They found it later upstairs, locked in a cabinet in the laundry room, alongside her wallet. My mother's words echoed in my head. It's for her peace of mind. I didn't cry. Not then. I was too stunned, too numb. The officers didn't bother asking for explanations anymore. They didn't need to. The lawyer was handcuffed first, his face unreadable. My parents followed. Then Maya. They didn't look at me once. I stayed with Sophie. I didn't let her go. Not for a single second. That was the night everything changed. But it wasn't the end. Not even close. The house felt emptier after the police left, even though the walls still held their secrets. I remember standing in the hallway with Sophie, her hand clutching mine so tightly my fingers went numb. She hadn't let go once, not through the search, not through the arrests, not even when the lawyer was shoved into the back of a squad car. I thought she might cry when the flashing lights faded down the driveway. But she didn't. She just whispered one word. Finally. We didn't stay the night. The officers insisted we leave with them, at least until statements could be finalized. I didn't argue. I packed what little we had brought, just a small bag with clothes, toothbrushes, Sophie's sketchbook, and we followed their cruiser down winding back roads until we hit the main highway. I asked Sophie softly, "Do you want to go home? Or somewhere else?" She stared out the window for a long time before answering. "Home," she whispered. But not alone. So we went home. The next 48 hours blurred together in interviews, paperwork, and endless cups of bitter station coffee. Sophie told her story 3 separate times, once to the local officers, once to the county detectives, once to the social worker who specialized in minors caught in domestic disputes. Each time her voice grew steadier, clearer. She didn't waver. When it was my turn, the questions came rapid fire. Had I noticed signs of abuse before? Had I seen her medication? Had I spoken to the lawyer? Did I understand the will? My answers sounded thin even to me. No, not really. I thought it was grief I didn't know. The truth was I hadn't wanted to know. Uncle David's will was straightforward. His entire estate, house, savings, investments, all of it, had gone to Sophie. He'd set aside a trust specifically for her, with provisions for her education, travel, and living expenses. The only condition was that she wouldn't have full access until she turned 21. Until then, a neutral trustee was supposed to oversee it. Except somehow that trustee had been replaced. Quietly, legally, but strategically. The man in handcuffs, the lawyer at the dinner table, had stepped in, and my parents had gained limited authority as her guardians. It was all buried in fine print, pages Sophie never had a chance to read. If she'd signed the new documents, she would have unknowingly surrendered everything. The local paper ran a story about it. Teen heir targeted in estate scheme. It was only a small column, tucked beneath weather and classifieds, but word spread fast in a town where everyone knew everyone. Strangers began stopping me at the grocery store. "Is your daughter okay?" They'd ask, voice dripping with pity. "We always knew something was off about your folks." I smiled politely. I nodded. And every time Sophie squeezed my hand harder, like she was afraid if she let go, someone else might take me from her. Then came the court date. It wasn't a trial, not yet, just the arraignment. My parents walked in first, stone-faced, their hands cuffed in front of them. My mother wore pearls. My father had combed his hair neatly. They looked like people attending church, not criminals facing fraud, coercion, and unlawful imprisonment charges. Maya followed, sullen and pale. She wouldn't look at me. The lawyer came last, lips pressed thin, eyes darting around the courtroom like a rat searching for holes. When the judge read the charges, my parents pled not guilty. Their attorney, someone expensive, polished, argued that this was all a misunderstanding, a grieving child, misread intentions, miscommunication. The judge set bail. And just like that, they were free again. That night, Sophie didn't sleep. I found her curled on the couch at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling. "They're going to come back," she whispered. "No," I said, sitting beside her. "They won't. The court won't let them near you." She shook her head. "You don't know them. They don't lose. Not like this." I wanted to tell her she was wrong. I wanted to promise her safety. But deep down I felt the same dread. Because she was right. 2 weeks later it began again. First came the letters, neatly typed, sent by their lawyer, urging me to reconsider. "Your daughter misunderstood. They were merely protecting her well-being. Surely we can settle this outside of court." I shredded them. Then came the phone calls. Unknown numbers at odd hours. Silence on the other end. Once a voice I recognized, Maya's, whispered, "You ruined everything." I blocked every number. Then came the car. A dark sedan parked across from our house 3 nights in a row, engine idling, lights off. By the time the police arrived, it was gone. Sophie stopped leaving the house. I stopped sleeping. It was during this time I found the envelope. It was buried in Sophie's sketchbook, tucked between pages of half-drawn flowers and unfinished portraits. At first, I thought it was just another note from her. But when I opened it, I realized it wasn't hers at all. It was from Uncle David. The handwriting was his. Careful looping, old-fashioned. The date in the corner was 3 months before he died. If you are reading this, Sophie, then I am gone. I need you to understand something very clearly. I trust you. More than anyone else. That's why everything is yours. Because I know you won't waste it, and you won't let anyone take it from you. But listen to me, your grandparents will try. They've always believed family is something they can control. They will see you as weak, vulnerable, and dependent. You are none of those things. You are stronger than they know. Trust yourself. Don't sign anything. And if you need help, find the safe deposit box. Bank of Marlowe. Box 47. The key is hidden in the clock I gave you. I read it twice, 3 times, my heart pounding harder with each word. A safe deposit box. A hidden key. Proof that he'd known this was coming. I looked at Sophie. She was asleep for once, curled in blankets, her face soft and peaceful. I didn't wake her. Instead, I went to her room, pulled the old brass clock from her shelf, and turned it over in my hands. My fingers trembled as I opened the back panel. And there it was. A tiny worn key. The next morning, we drove to the Bank of Marlowe. Sophie didn't speak the whole ride. She just held the key tight in her palm. The clerk checked our IDs, verified the documents, then led us to a small windowless room. The safe deposit box slid out on metal rails. Inside was a single envelope, thick and sealed with wax. Sophie broke it open with shaking hands. Inside were photographs. Not family photos. Not memories. Evidence. Receipts. Bank transfers. Copies of emails. Letters written by my parents, by their lawyer, outlining plans, discussing strategies, even mocking Sophie's grief. One line in my mother's handwriting made my stomach turn. She's young. She'll fold. We'll have her signing within weeks. There was enough in that box to destroy them completely. And Uncle David had known. He had prepared. He had trusted Sophie to find it. She cried then. Not quiet tears, but heavy body-shaking sobs that broke through every wall she'd built since the funeral. I held her. I let her cry. And when she was done, she whispered, "We have to finish this." She was right. Because the story wasn't over. Not yet. The evidence from Uncle David's safe deposit box didn't just strengthen our case. It changed everything. Suddenly, it wasn't Sophie's word against theirs. It was paper. Dates. Signatures. Cold, undeniable proof that my parents and their lawyer hadn't just misunderstood. They had planned, plotted, and executed a scheme to strip Sophie of everything her uncle had left her. The prosecutor's eyes lit up when he saw the documents. "This is gold," he said, flipping through page after page. "They can't talk their way out of this anymore." Sophie sat quietly across the table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked calm, but I could feel the storm swirling inside her. The next hearing was different. This time, the courtroom wasn't half empty. Reporters filled the back rows. Curious neighbors whispered in hushed tones. The story had spread: small town scandal, big money, betrayal inside a family. My parents entered again in their pressed clothes, their lawyer strutting beside them like he still owned the room. Maya followed, her head bowed. But when the evidence was presented, the receipts, the letters, the emails, their expressions faltered. The judge read aloud lines written in my mother's hand. Words I could barely believe came from her. "The girl is fragile, easy to manipulate. She'll never fight back." Sophie lifted her chin at that. For the first time, she wasn't shrinking in their presence. She was watching, listening, standing tall. When it was Sophie's turn to speak, the courtroom fell silent. She walked to the stand, clutching her uncle's letter in her hand. Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened with tears. "My uncle trusted me," she said softly. "He believed in me when no one else did. He left me his home, his savings, because he wanted me to have a chance at a future. And instead of honoring that, the people who were supposed to protect me tried to take it away. They told me I was weak, that I didn't understand. But I do understand. And I'm not weak." Her words echoed in the room. Even the reporter stopped scribbling. I looked at my parents then, my mother's lips trembling, my father's jaw tight. For the first time, I think they realized they had already lost. The judge ruled swiftly. Bail revoked. Guardianship stripped. The lawyer disbarred and facing multiple charges. My parents ordered into custody to await trial. Maya was different. Her involvement had been minimal, her role unclear. She was shaken, pale, caught between loyalty and guilt. The court allowed her leniency and she walked out free that day. But when she passed us in the hallway, she didn't meet my eyes. She just whispered, almost too soft to hear, "I didn't know it would go this far." And then she was gone. Afterward, Sophie and I stepped outside into the cool air. For the first time in months, the weight on her shoulders seemed lighter. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "you get to live. Without fear. Without them." She nodded, but I could tell she was still processing it all. Victory didn't erase scars. Healing would take time. In the weeks that followed, we began piecing life back together. The trust fund was secured under a new, impartial guardian until Sophie turned 21. The house, once a place of shadows and schemes, became hers entirely. She decided not to move back in, not yet. Instead, we found a small rental, bright and quiet, where she could breathe. Sometimes I'd catch her sitting with her sketchbook, drawing flowers again. The colors were returning to her pages. But the story didn't end in silence. The trial dragged on for months. The headlines grew larger. Couple convicted in estate fraud. Local lawyer faces prison and exploitation case. The world was watching, and my parents' carefully crafted reputation crumbled piece by piece. When sentencing day arrived, Sophie insisted on attending. The judge's gavel came down with finality. Years in prison, restitution ordered, reputations ruined. My mother looked at Sophie one last time as she was led away. No anger, no denial, just defeat. Sophie didn't flinch. Afterward, as we walked out of the courthouse for the last time, Sophie stopped on the steps. She took a deep breath, the winter air turning white in front of her. "They can't hurt me anymore," she whispered. "No," I said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "They can't." She leaned against me, and for the first time since that awful dinner, I saw a smile, small, tentative, but real. Life didn't magically return to normal. Never could. But Sophie found strength in places she never knew she had. She enrolled in art classes, something her uncle had always encouraged. She made friends outside the family, people who saw her for who she was, not what she had inherited. And sometimes, late at night, she'd pull out Uncle David's letter and read it again. Not because she needed reminding, but because it felt like he was still there, guiding her, reminding her she wasn't alone. As for me, I learned something too. I had grown up under my parents' control, convinced their way was the only way. But watching Sophie fight, watching her stand tall against the very people who tried to break her, I realized strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it simply refuses to bend. One evening, months later, Sophie and I sat on the porch of our little rental. She was sketching the sunset, the sky streaked in oranges and pinks. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Regret what?" "Walking out that night. Listening to the message." I thought about it, the fear, the chaos, the way everything I thought I knew about my family shattered in an instant. And then I looked at her, alive, safe, free. "Not for a second," I said. She smiled, setting her pencil down. "Me neither." And in that quiet moment, with the last light fading from the sky, I knew the truth. We hadn't just survived. We had won.